Most of us have come across a Karen at some point, a term that refers to people who overreact and become easily angered when faced with minor inconveniences. This trend, which became popular in 2020, describes those who act as though they can avoid any repercussions for their actions. However, when faced with the consequences, particularly in legal contexts, these individuals often respond with dramatic outbursts of anger or frustration. In this video, we will explore some remarkable examples of Karens reacting to legal judgments passed down to them in court. Number 10. Antonio Barbo is a name to remember. Although the term Karen usually describes women, you should be aware that there are male equivalents, sometimes referred to as Karens. Imagine receiving a life sentence. It's natural to feel irate and want to react, whether male or female. This was the case with Antonio Barbo. This young individual faced justice after being found guilty of killing his great-grandmother using a hammer. Along with his accomplice, Nathan Pape, Antonio used a hatchet and hammer to attack the 78-year-old woman during a burglary. When she caught them, they chose to kill her instead. Antonio grabbed the hammer and struck her on the head, hitting her 3 to 4 times. They even tried to stuff her body in a car trunk but eventually left it in a garage, covered with a blanket. This whole situation is unsettling. The idea of robbing an elderly woman is distressing enough, but the fact that Antonio killed his own great-grandmother is deeply disturbing. Finally, Antonio and Nathan received their sentences. Antonio, who appeared to be the mastermind, was sentenced to life in prison. This 14-year-old, who should have been starting high school, now faced a life behind bars. During his court hearing, Antonio was emotional and struggled to speak, even relying on his lawyer to finish his statement. Despite tears and emotional displays, no amount of sympathy would change his fate. As reported by Myra Sanchik of Fox News in Sheboygan, no crocodile tears would set him free. Farewell, buddy. See you when we see you. Number 9. Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham begin our video with a duo of unsettling examples that will surely spark your attention. In the year 2011, these two names became nationally known when Erica and Shanita, both 25 and from South Carolina, were found guilty of the horrifying murder of 3-year-old Serenity Richardson. The little girl had been entrusted to their care, and both women were romantically involved. Serenity had even previously visited Erica, her godmother. According to the information available, both women assaulted the young girl relentlessly, using plastic coat hangers and a belt, leaving her with scars on every part of her body except the soles of her feet. What is the motivation for this appalling act? Erica informed local police that Serenity had an accident, soiling the floor, and they decided to discipline her. Tragically, their brutal assault ended her life. After realizing the severity of their actions, they tried to conceal the evidence by placing Serenity on ice and exposing her body to bleach. Nevertheless, it was too late, and the young girl died. The court eventually charged both women, holding them accountable for their heinous crimes. The judge sentenced them to life in prison, describing their actions as highly disturbing. Upon hearing their sentences, Erica and Shanita reacted dramatically, with one falling and rolling on the floor and the other dropping to her knees, gasping for breath. Adding to the chaos, their family members in the back of the courtroom mirrored their hysteria, and 3 staff members had to forcibly remove Erica's mother as she continued to shout at her daughter. The entire scene serves as a chilling reminder that some acts are so inexcusable that they elicit a response as disturbing as the crimes themselves. If only these individuals had understood the sacred value of a child's life rather than treating it with such merciless disregard. Number 8. Anthony Rodriguez. Anthony Rodriguez is a bit of a cautionary tale. This guy seemed to just find himself at the wrong place at the wrong time almost at every point in time, and he ended up paying for it at the end of the day back in 2013. Anthony got a sentence of 25 years to life after he was found guilty of assault. According to reports, he had stalked out his victim at the popular MLK Park in Buffalo, New York. He then proceeded to rob, kidnap, and sexually assault her now. While these offenses are terrible, I don't think they were into life sentence. The problem with Anthony, however, is the fact that he had been a serial offender at that point. The 18-year-old at the time had already been arrested and was even on probation at the point when he was linked to the crime. And by the time forensic experts found his DNA sample at the crime scene, it was pretty much a wrap for him throughout his trial. Anthony had been keeping a pretty cavalier attitude. He didn't let anything get to him and kept his cool. However, on the very last, the day he seemed to just lose his cool, as his sentence was eventually read out about it. I couldn't quite get what he was saying, but I can see the look in his eyes. That's the guy who knows he's done. Anthony went one step further, yelling profanities at the judge and the prosecuting attorneys. He even went as far as calling the ruling unfair and tussling with the court security. Hey, if you're going to go out, you might as well do so with a bang. Right, adios, Anthony. Number 7. TJ Lane. TJ Lane is one of those peculiar cases where a person can literally be called a psychopath for real-born Thomas Lane III. This 17-year-old used to be a student at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, but had transferred to the nearby Lake Academy Alternative School at the time. He killed 3 of the school students, however, shared a bus with his victims, and for whatever reason appeared to have developed a rivalry with several of the school students. And it all came to a head on the morning of February 27th. Chardon High School opened that morning before classes, with many students gathering at the cafeteria to get breakfast. TJ, who used to be a student of the school, appeared to know his way around already, so it wasn't much of a hassle getting in once he was in. TJ suddenly opened fire on everyone's surveillance footage. Especially saw him fire on 4 students who had been seated at a table. They were later identified to have been taking the same bus as him, meaning that TJ probably had some sort of beef with the boys. Amid the shooting, TJ had inadvertently injured another student, and while he was trying to make his escape, he shoots another innocent girl. He was eventually chased out of the school by one of the teachers and the football coach. Although he was arrested soon after near the school, TJ's firing spree led to the death of 3 people, while the other 3 people he had shot were left critically injured. Definitely, he was not going to be getting off scot-free. Still, through this guy was pretty much playing without any remorse in his court appearance. He appeared wearing this look of indifference as the proceedings around him were going on. Then the first act of defiance came as he was just about to sit down. He starts to unbutton his shirt, and even with his attorney advising against it, he revealed a vest with the word killer written on it. Thank you. I'm saying to pull the triggers done. You know, Master based his memory. Definitely this was one guy that didn't care about anything. He was eventually given 3 consecutive life sentences, which he would now serve without the possibility of parole. Serves him right, if you ask me. Number 6. Dylan Schumacher. The case of Dylan Schumacher is as sad as it is horrific. This teenager was convicted of killing his girlfriend's son just a few days before his birthday, causing a massive uproar. At the time, Dylan was just a 16-year-old kid in 2013 when he committed this unspeakable crime, according to reports. He had been babysitting his girlfriend's brother Austin, as well as Austin's older brother, while his girlfriend Ashley worked at a restaurant in the town of Springfield. Although he was young, Dylan had reportedly suffered from substance abuse and addiction a few months prior to the murder. He had just come back home from a court-ordered rehabilitation center after he had gotten in trouble. As a result of his substance abuse issues, he was seemingly on a path to becoming a better person. So it's understandable that his girlfriend could have trusted him with her son Dylan, and Ashley had been on and off for a while, both of them seemingly related to each other because they had both come from seemingly unstable homes. Ashley had even been kicked out of her parents' house after they reportedly found an unused condom in her bed with no home of her own. Ashley had been staying with Dylan and his mother, despite their seeming closeness. Reports also found that Dylan and Ashley was in a bit of a dysfunctional relationship. Dylan had been abusive, and Ashley was even planning on taking her kids and leaving the house. Sadly, she didn't take action before Dylan committed the unspeakable crime. Say this little boy was brutally beaten to death just days before his 2nd birthday tonight. His mom's 16-year-old boyfriend is behind bars, charged with murder. Dylan allegedly assaulted Austin and head whipped him before finishing him off. The little boy had blood vessels in his brain that popped, causing permanent internal bleeding in his head. The teenager was eventually arrested and found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Although not before he broke down in court. I can't take back what was done. I wish I could. I would give my life for Austin. I loved him. Dylan's attorney even pinned the blame on his inability to control his emotions and his inexperience as a babysitter. Yeah, I doubt that's the hill you want to die right now. Sir, number 5. Brandon Spencer. Before we go further, here's one thing you should know about Karens. They come in Texas and races. I understand that the general perception of a Karen is a white woman who yells and is hysterical. I think we all know that anyone is capable of being hysterical. Take the case of Brandon Spencer. Brandon was a 21-year-old back in 2014, chasing his dream of being a football player at the University of Southern Carolina. But on a fateful night that year, Brandon reportedly shot up a Halloween party, wounding 4 people in the process. Now, this case was a pretty weird one, according to Brandon's family. He was a good kid who never got into any trouble and pretty much stayed in his own lane. However, reports from investigators also claimed that he appeared to have been a gang member who had a falling out with someone from a rival gang. One thing led to another, and he decided to take a loaded gun to the Halloween party, where he knew his opponent was boom shots. Fired, people injured. Whoever's account you believe, the fact remains that this guy took a loaded weapon to a party and had the intention of killing someone. He was eventually arrested 2 days after the party and was given a sentence of 40 years to life in prison at his court. Hearing Brandon was pretty much inconsolable. He hit his head on a desk and was even seen pleading with the judge, seemingly begging for his freedom. 1202233. He did seem apologetic, though, although at this point, it's too little too late. Number 4. Joshua Phillips for our next video. We'll be taking a break from the norm for a little bit. Instead of showing a hysterical reaction, why not look at someone who seemed to have been more remorseful? Meet Joshua Phillips. Joshua was only 14 when he killed his then 8-year-old neighbor, Maddie Clifton. According to reports, Joshua had a pretty disturbed childhood. He and his family had just moved into the new neighborhood in the Lakewood suburbs of Jacksonville, Florida, and he had trouble making friends just as well as his father. Steve was an alcoholic and drug addict who frequently tormented him and his mother. Josh had been lonely and reclusive person at the time, and Maddie was pretty much the only friend he had when he moved into the neighborhood one day. Maddie had come to play with Joshua when he accidentally hit her in the eye with a baseball, scared to death of what his abusive father would do if he said anything. Joshua immediately dragged Maddie into his room, kicking and screaming. He strangled her and hit her with his bat. Then he went ahead and slit her throat, desperate to clean everything up before his parents got home. Joshua kept Maddie's body under his bed and pretty much slept on it for the next week. Eventually, his mother noticed a funky smell coming out of his room and found Maddie's lifeless body. She eventually reported to the police, and Joshua was taken in after a lengthy court proceeding. Joshua was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He did have an opportunity to appeal the case a few years later, but his appeal was overturned. At that point, a much older Joshua gave a speech explaining how remorseful he was about what he had done. "I don't pretend to know or understand your pain, autographed a void that I have created in your lives. I can say this, I do understand pain." Number 3. Ronnie O'Neal in March 2018. Ronnie O'Neal made national headlines after he was convicted of killing his then-girlfriend Kenyatta Barron and their daughter Ron Nevaeh O'Neal. The event was a pretty weird one. Ronnie, who was 29 at the time, made a 911 call, and police officers claimed they had heard him claim that he was being attacked by white demons. He also accused Kenyatta of trying to kill him and claimed he had just killed her as well. A few moments later, police officers arrived at the couple's house to find Kenyatta lying unconscious in the yard. Ronnie had also beaten Ron Nevaeh with a hatchet, killing her. He also his son Ronnie Thor. Although the little boy was only critically wounded when Ronnie Thor woke up, he reportedly testified that his father had shot his mother besides killing his girlfriend, and Kid Ronnie also set fire to the entire home. Police officers immediately arrested him, although he tried to resist arrest, and was only taken in after he had been tasered while in the cop car. Ronnie repeatedly called Kenyatta the devil, and referred to their children as the devil's kids at his trial. Ronnie decided not to use the services of a lawyer, and instead represent himself. And this was where he decided to break into an entire rambling routine, some of them up fishes, while delivering his closing statements. Ronnie flat out admitted to killing his girlfriend too, but I want you to tell it like it is. I wonder what he was trying to prove at this point. Whatever it is, definitely didn't work out. Ronnie was given 3 life sentences plus an additional 90 years tacked on for good measure. Tough luck, buddy. Number 2. Nicholas Cruz. Sometimes reactions to life sentences can be just as chilling as they are menacing, and in the case of Nicholas Cruz, one can only imagine what was going on in his head when his sentence was being read out. For those who might not know, Nicholas was the teenager who opened fire on students and teachers at the Stoneman Douglas High School in the suburban town of Parkland, Florida. Back in 2018, the event led to the death of 17 people and has become one of the most infamous mass shootings in recent history for his crimes. It was pretty obvious that Nicholas was going to be getting a massive sentence, and as you could only expect, the entire court proceedings were pretty intense, filled with a lot of emotions and agitation. However, what was especially killing was Nicholas's reaction to it all. Seemed incredibly relaxed. and didn't even bat an eyelid. I mean, even up until the point when the sentence was being read down, Nicholas was cool as a cucumber sentence of the court as follows: count 1. Of course, this isn't to say that the entire trial was a sweet experience for Nicholas. As one of the court proceedings, everyone was forced to listen to recordings of his murderous spree, and Nicholas was so traumatized by what he had done that he just couldn't stand to listen. Nicholas was eventually sentenced to life in prison on multiple counts of murder. At least the world doesn't have to deal with this murderous psychopath anymore. Number 1. Darrell Brooks is one for the book for a classic example of a Karen showing off his unfettered self in a courtroom. Darrell Brooks is a man from Wisconsin who was convicted of the heinous crime of murder, but he wasn't just a murderer. Apparently, he had worked his way up to this point for years. Darrell had made a name for himself advocating for violence against Jews and white people online. Things eventually went to a head in December 2021 when he drove his SUV straight through a Christmas parade in Milwaukee, an act that led to the death of 6 innocent people for such an unthinkable crime. Darrell was arraigned before the court and immediately made to face the music. Darrell was so bold that he decided not to go for an attorney and represent himself instead. But at some point, I'm pretty sure this guy must have known he was going to be found guilty, so he just decided to be insufferable defendant/attorney in the entire proceedings. Take this case, for example, when he blatantly decided to ignore all of the judge's warnings because he was trying to make a bogus claim. Mr. Brooks, stop talking till the jury is out. Thank you. Why couldn't we address this before they came out? I'm not going to address it in another instance. Darrell was questioning his ex-girlfriend who claimed they had just been in a fight before he decided to go all road rage on the innocent Christmas parade. Darrell tried to paint his ex as a terrible mother, but when her lawyer came to her defense, he lost it. He impregnated Erica Patterson when she was a minor in Nevada, and for doing so, he was convicted of statutory school seduction, pled guilty in March of 2007 to that felony offensive. In another instance, Darrell decided to blatantly disrespect the judge by arguing about what the entire proceedings were, even about respect, because I find it hard to believe that nobody hears what I say. I'm gonna let the state makes a record of. Why they believe it's objective, trust me, guys. We could spend a whole day analyzing the many outbursts that this guy went on just because he was trying to make his case, and through it all, the judge calmly and clearly made him understand that he was being very disrespectful. Still, he basically didn't care. He just went on and on like it was nobody's business. Darrell was eventually hit with 6 consecutive life sentences, as well as an additional 700 years in jail for his crimes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that would teach him to be a murderous anti-Semitic jerk. As for Judge Jennifer Darrow, she pretty much became a celebrity across the town, according to reports. Dozens of people who watched live streams of the trial written to congratulate her on her patience, demeanor, and knowledge of the law while dealing with the case. Some called her a saint, while others sent her packages, including wine, edible arrangements, flowers, and even gift cards for massages, to be honest. I definitely want her to get a spa session after dealing with that guy's antics. If there's anything we've learned from this video, it's that Karens come in different sizes, races. I personally don't think anyone has the right to be insufferable toward others, but this is the world in which we live today. What do you think about these cases? Should the Karens have gotten worse punishment than they did? Hit us in the comments and let us know what your thoughts on these Karens.